Minnesota and our local law enforcement, as you have seen, have done everything possible to de-escalate. Local media has reported extensively on the cooperation to de-escalate this situation. Despite the horrific acts by this federal government, Minnesotans are standing up for the rule of law. They're protesting loudly and urgently, but peacefully.
So here we go again. It's yet another day in Minneapolis where the Democrat Party is, first of all, inciting their voter base to go commit violence based on the hoaxes and lies that they're spreading about ICE. And then when their deranged voters go and threaten the lives of ICE agents in response, the Democrat Party, instead of turning down the temperature, quote unquote, instead responds by perpetuating a hoax about that as well, which now proceeds to cause even more rioting, chaos, and threats of terrorism in the streets of Minneapolis. In other words, to make a long story short, what is going on? The Democrat Party continues to engage in stochastic terrorism and incite violence against ICE agents. And this case today, this new hoax they're spreading is absolutely no different. Before we get into those details, I just want to start off by kind of reiterating a point I made yesterday, which is that at a certain point, there's going to have to be legal accountability for politicians and media figures who so blatantly lie about these situations with the intended goal to provoke and incite more domestic terrorism. You know, you can play the excuse of the First Amendment all you want, and I understand the need to, preserve a degree of freedoms in a democratic society, but the issue I can clearly see, right? The point I made yesterday is that you cannot really expect a constitutional republic, which does require some degree of social trust in one another to survive, if one side of the aisle is constantly trying to burn it down, right? You can't survive in a republic or a democracy when one political party continues to engage in terrorism, political assassinations. They won't allow federal law to be enforced because local and state governments are engaged in insurrection. Like, at a certain point, this dam is going to break. It's something that is deeply concerning to me, which is frankly why I wish the left would just calm down and act like normal humans that can actually function in a democratic society. But clearly that is not the case. Clearly these people continue to push the bounds of everything, right? How far are they willing to go in terms of quote unquote protests where now they're just engaged in violence, right? How far are they willing to go with their quote unquote free speech where they basically just incite violence on a daily basis? And then inevitably, when they break the system and we come in and say, okay, it's time for law and order, then they call us authoritarians. At a certain point, this is going to have to stop. But anyways, that said, I do want to bring you the full coverage of what went down in Minneapolis today, because apparently we did see a situation where ICE was unfortunately forced into the situation where they had to open fire on yet another left-wing agitator, in this case, because that agitator came at them, was resisting arrest, and by all accounts does appear to have pulled out a gun. The video is pretty blurry, but we do know he was armed, okay? So now it's like very straight up. So if the argument on Renee Good always, and it's still true by the way, is that a vehicle is a deadly weapon. But here now we have a case where, there's not that much controversy anymore or even room for debate. The guy had a freaking gun. And what are left-wingers doing? First of all, what are Democratic politicians responding by saying? They're not even acknowledging whether or not the protester was armed. They're just saying another American was killed. And then we are seeing even more rioting out in the streets saying, oh, you killed an American. Although, I guess that is very fitting for the behavior of leftists, is it not? I mean, they respond to, an act of violence that was caused entirely by their own behavior, by themselves engaging in more violence. Nonetheless, today, guys, I want to bring you this full coverage. So we'll show you what's currently going on in the streets of Minneapolis. We'll show you the actual case that they're supposedly angry about, that once again, I will repeat, does appear to be yet another hoax. And I do also want to show you some of the latest announcements from Tim Walz, because apparently he is finally following through on his promise to deploy the National Guard in order to stop the federal government. Although when you take a listen to what the National Guard official there actually has to say about it, sounds like there does seem to be some confusion, because he's basically arguing, no, we're deploying the National Guard to actually protect the safety of everyone involved and essentially make sure that these protesters, quote unquote, stop trying to harass and commit terrorism against ICE agents. But anyways, let's get into all of this, guys. Lots to talk about. So let's just get started here. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of our latest news and coverage. And that said, I do want to begin here tonight by just simply showing you what we're currently watching on the streets of Minneapolis.
We just have a few moments here, but it seems to be some smoke is rising. I don't know if these are smoke bombs. It was peaceful when we began to talk, and we noted that rhetoric really matters now, and calming tensions really matters. What are we seeing on our screens now? What's your analysis of this?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to keep things calm and, diffuse the tension. Again, Kaylee, this is not what agents ever want to have happen. It's insulting to hear this governor make it seem like, this is the wild, wild west and this is what they want to be doing. This is not what they want to be doing. They are literally enforcing the laws. These are targeted interactions. These are targeted operations. They are simply doing their job. And again, without the details of who this subject is, whether they were someone that they were arresting, whether they were a bystander or protester, frankly, when you're looking at the deadly force policies, that's completely irrelevant. For them, they are literally looking at what we've gone over and over before. But my piece of advice to anyone in Minneapolis and frankly anywhere in the country, let the law enforcement do their job. If you don't want to run into problems, stay out of the...
I say it definitely does feel organized to me, and I think you can tell these people are well connected. They are in communication with each other, and they are giving them instructions. This happened all so quickly. People knew where to go, and they are taking commands. This is an organized movement here. There's communication, there's food, there's notices, there's notifications. They got out here in a hurry, and they outnumber this police force probably by about 10 to 1 at this point.
It's incredible.
And by the way, in large part due to the rhetoric and lies spread by Democrat politicians, tensions do continue to escalate here today. Don't get me wrong, we've been seeing rioting and violence in Minneapolis for several weeks now. After all, these are Democrat voters we are speaking about. Nobody should be all that surprised. But here you now even see scenes of them carrying and setting up these trash cans and wooden barricades up to the police line. We can only assume what this is to be used for, especially in the night. That's right. If you ever seen the videos of Portland Antifa doing the exact same thing, it's so that way they can take cover, right? They're behind these things. The law enforcement doesn't know who they are. And then not only can you hide from kind of sort of tear gas like that, you can also obviously, pop out and engage in much of the same behavior. I'll just put it that way, that we've seen many of these so-called left-wing heroes already do when it comes to fighting ICE agents or fighting law enforcement. So here are those. Now, I guess they got even bigger dumpsters. By the way, they appear to just simply be blocking an entire street in the middle of Minneapolis. I'm going to guess they don't have a permit from the city to do this. So here you have yet another case, right, where Minneapolis police have allowed this mob of lunatics to completely take over these streets. They're blocking an entire road, Doesn't appear in all these cases they're necessarily using city barricades, and they basically just sit there and say, okay, have it. And of course, they're still going to sit there and claim, first of all, that these protesters are peaceful as they literally set up the barricades to go have a war on our streets tonight. And that secondly, Minneapolis police is doing everything they can to ensure order. And for months, they've said, we don't need National Guard. Hey, our law enforcement are, trying to keep everybody safe. This is all just First Amendment behavior going on here. Yeah, so much First Amendment. You can clearly tell, right? None of that is the reality of what is happening in the streets. But that said, okay, as you watch these scenes from Minneapolis, you may be asking to yourself, what exactly are they so pissed about? What ticked them off? Well, this all has to do with a ICE-related shooting, the information of which released earlier today, in which, I think this is put quite well, right? An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol agents with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. He was armed with a gun. The agents attempted to disarm the individual, but he violently resisted. Fearing for his life and the lives of fellow officers, a Border Patrol agent fired defensive shots. Okay? So again, much like freaking Renee Good, much like the hoax about the kid earlier this week, here we have yet another case where deranged leftists threaten and endanger the lives of ICE agents, this time with a gun, Suddenly the anti-gun people are very pro-open carry laws or something like that, and puts the ICE agents in a position where they're forced to defend their lives. The left then responds to that by crying victim. You shot this person for absolutely no reason, just straight up lying about it, right? Just straight up misrepresenting the entire situation. And we see even more rioting in response, and now even more people apparently think it's a good idea to go do this whole community patrol thing against ICE where, let me just say, they're not practicing their First Amendment. They're not actually legally documenting what's going on. They're impeding law enforcement, and in some cases doing a lot worse than that. But nonetheless, take a listen here to the full details of, again, the reason why you're seeing leftists riot in the streets as we speak.
At 9:05 a.m. Central Standard Time, as DHS law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted operation in Minneapolis against an illegal alien, Jose Huerta Chuma. You can see this illegal alien on the screen to my left and right. That is Jose Huerta Chuma, whose criminal history includes domestic assault to intentionally inflict bodily harm, disorderly conduct, and driving without a valid license. During this operation, an individual approached U.S. Border Patrol agents with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The agents attempted to disarm the individual, but he violently resisted. Fearing for his life and the lives and safety of fellow officers, a Border Patrol agent fired defensive shots. Medics on the scene immediately delivered medical aid to the subject, but the subject was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 loaded magazines and no accessible ID. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Then, about 200 rioters arrived at the scene and began to obstruct and assault law enforcement. Crowd control measures have been deployed for the safety of the public and law enforcement. This situation is evolving, and more information is forthcoming. The officer was highly trained and had been serving as a Border Patrol agent for 8 years. The officer has extensive training as a range safety officer and less lethal officer.
Yeah, so pretty typical left-wing story, right? Democrats show up to protect an illegal alien with a criminal history because, after all, that's the very best among us. Those are our immigrant neighbors, etc., etc. And in the process of doing so, you have a crazed leftist show up with a gun, and then apparently he was just there doing nothing, is the story, right? They're going to sit there and protest and act as if ICE just opened fire on some American citizen for absolutely no reason. I like to point out, too, by the way, because I'm sure this excuse is going to come from the other side. Oh, well, don't you guys believe in the Second Amendment? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, here's the thing, actually, is if you really want to get into that debate, the guy broke several laws in this process because Minnesota is a state where you need to have a license or a permit, right, to conceal or open carry a firearm. And in the process, I seriously doubt, honestly, he even had a CCW, but if he did, you still are supposed to carry identification on you when you're carrying the gun for obvious law enforcement purposes. So, and you could argue, right, that maybe it shouldn't be that way. The Second Amendment right should be absolute, but keep in mind, those are laws that Democrats wrote and supported putting into place, okay? And then they're going to turn around and claim that all these quote-unquote ICE observers, right, the resistance out in the streets are being peaceful and law-abiding. By definition, they're not being law-abiding. They're not even following the gun laws, ironically, that Democrats wanted to put into place. And then secondly, let me just further point out that the Second Amendment nor the First Amendment gives you a right to, impede law enforcement and or resist arrest, which is basically how this all started. Now, we do have some videos of the incident. I will, refrain by saying that They are quite blurry and sort of far away. It's hard to see what happened, but I would like to show you at least what we can show by YouTube guidelines in terms of what led up to the situation, just so you can get like a visual idea of everything that's being described here. So you can see you have at least two separate individuals here resisting arrest, and then one of them appears to reach for a gun, and that's when the ICE agents open fire. So take a look.
They're doing too much, man, and they keep pushing people, you know?
Oh shit! What the?
Go! What the fuck is wrong with you? The fuck, people? The fuck is wrong with you? Honestly.
Now, admittedly, it's difficult, at least for me, to see in that video exactly what happened. Some have pointed out, you know, from another angle, this is when the suspect pulls out the gun. Others have tried to note, hey, there seemed to be like a blast that went past the ICE officer coming from the suspect's direction, so maybe the suspect may have even gotten a shot off. Sure, that part of it, you know, we'd like to see some body cam footage, even like to see the angle of this person right here, because they appear to be closer to the entire incident. But the overall point is what? The leftists in the streets didn't care either way. You know, it was widely reported from the beginning, hey, here's someone with a gun. They tried to pull it out on ICE officers, apparently. We know for a fact he was armed. As a matter of fact, DHS has released this photograph of the 9mm SIG handgun that was recovered from the suspect, and so that part of it is absolutely a known fact. And this, for instance, is the statement of Donald Trump on it, saying, quote, "This is the gunman's gun loaded with 2 additional full magazines and ready to go." What is that all about? Well, we should ask that question as well, right? Because, look, we're the right wing. We believe in the Second Amendment. I get it. But you do also have to ask the question, right? First of all, was he even in his legal right in the state of Minnesota to carry? Because I'm not here to, frankly, defend the gun rights of, left-wing domestic terrorists who don't even believe in them. So, they should absolutely be held to the same standards of their own laws. So that I believe that part of it, right? But even then, okay, even if you're in your legal right to carry, what is the point of carrying when you know that day you're going to be not just like watching ICE agents from afar, but actively impeding and obstructing in their operations, okay? So obviously that part is up for speculation, but no, I don't think the idea that he was carrying it specifically with the intention of potentially at some point opening fire on the ICE agents themselves, it's not that crazy of an assumption to believe, okay? So where are the local police? Another good question, by the way. You notice in that video, there's this whole struggle going on, okay? This is yet another situation where, as much as we're going to be accused of celebrating it, no, this is something that never should have happened. You know why it should have never happened? Because first and foremost, number one, crazy left-wing wannabe activists or whatever they think they are, agitators, terrorists, whatever you want to call them, okay, should not be showing up to every active crime scene where ICE is doing something and trying to physically impede their operations, and in some case do a lot worse than that. Run them over with cars, pull guns on them. Yeah, that just shouldn't be something that's happening. Number one. Number two, okay, even if that is their will that they want to do that, it should not be physically possible to happen. You know why? Because the local police department should, if they don't even want to engage themselves in the immigration operations, should at least take the basic measures of public safety to say, okay, if there's protesters, if there's left-wing agitators, we're going to basically make a barrier so that way the crowd can't get too close to the ICE agents themselves. And that's why it should have never happened. The guy shouldn't have been in this position to begin with because he's doing something really stupid. And secondly, yes, absolutely, Minneapolis leaders dropped the ball yet again by practicing their sanctuary city policy where they don't want MPD to be seen like they're assisting ICE, which really means we're going to surrender control of the streets and public safety to the left-wing mob. Yes, that part of it shouldn't be happening. Okay, so look, I agree. It shouldn't have happened. That's why it shouldn't have happened. Very similar to the Renee Good situation, right? It shouldn't have happened because she, first of all, should not have been in that position, right? She shouldn't have put herself there and then done what she did. And it's very unfortunate, right, that those bad decisions were made. But then secondly, even if she wanted to be an idiot, okay, there should have been some basic level of law enforcement to say, look, you know, we're not going to allow left-wing mobs to be using their cars to block ICE in the streets because guess what? Also, this is our city as MPD. We have a job to do ourselves. But see, that's where it goes wrong. When left-wingers decide to get involved in domestic terrorism, and secondly, local police do nothing to stop them, then inevitably what's going to happen? There's going to be a confrontation between the crazy left-wing agitators and the ICE agents themselves, and then the left wing blames ICE and blames the Trump administration for decisions that were, first of all, made by left-wingers themselves, and then secondly, enabled by the police department who practices sanctuary city policies. That's what really happened here, right? So that's a great question. Where are the local police? Why are they not allowed to protect ICE officers? That's because the mayor and governor called them off. Yes, that's actually the case. That's how sanctuary city policies work, right? It is stated that many of these police were not allowed to do their job, that ICE had to protect themselves. And yes, by the way, ICE should not be in that position. They shouldn't have to do it. You know why? Their job, after all, they're called Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which means that other law enforcement agencies, such as, say, the police, right, should be handling these matters of civil unrest, crazy protesters, right? So I, too, would very much like to live in a world where we don't have to see these scenes every day. You know why? Because I want ICE to be able to do their job, which is immigration enforcement, without having to be harassed and attacked by psychotic leftists on a daily basis, okay? So when Democrats say, oh, well, they're sowing chaos on our streets and stuff like that. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. You could allow them to do their job. They're there to do immigration enforcement, right? They're not there to actually be police officers. In many cases, that's not really their jurisdiction. It's not their job. So let them do their job, okay? If you don't want them to be, in your words, the judge, jury, and executioner, like you always claim, okay, well then do your own job as the police. Do you think they want to be doing this, right? I know you think that there's some type of crazy right-wing power fantasy, but let me just say, I would guess even the most quote-unquote aggressive of ICE agents would rather not have to deal with the whole hassle and public outrage and potential criminal charges and all the consequences that could come with having to deal with U.S. citizens who are, you know, engaging in these types of behaviors. They'd much rather, too, MPD do their job. This whole thing would be easier. As a matter of fact, you want ICE out of Minnesota, right? The immigration operation probably would be done by now if we didn't have the insane leftists chasing everybody around everywhere and trying to impede the operations. So let them do their job and maybe they'll leave, right? Because that's happened in many other cities, but you know how it goes. But anyways, here we have it. Not an easy thing to do. Why does Ilhan Omar have $34 million in her account? And where are the tens of billions of dollars that have been stolen from the once great state of Minnesota? We are there because of massive monetary fraud with billions of dollars missing and illegal criminals that were allowed to infiltrate the state through the Democrats' open border policy. We want the money back and we want it now. Those fraudsters who stole the money are going to jail where they belong. This is no different really than a big bank robbery. Much of what you're witnessing is a cover-up for this theft and fraud. By the way, I have to argue that's absolutely true. You know, these Democrats can claim that they find it to be such a tragedy when their voters intentionally put themselves in the firing line of these types of situations. But after all, they're spending every single day in every single speech actively encouraging the so-called ICE observers and protesters and the resistance to do what they're doing. They keep on saying, hey, get in the face of ICE agents, call 911, film everything they're doing, go up to them, right? You know, they're celebrating these people as heroes, right? And then secondly, you have to imagine they very much like all the public attention this is causing because, yes, it is indeed shifting focus away from the very fraud scandal and the very reason why ICE is in Minnesota to begin with, which has a lot to do not just with Somali criminals, but let's remember, right, with these Democratic politicians themselves. So the mayor and governor are inciting insurrection with their pompous, dangerous, and arrogant rhetoric. True. Instead, the sanctimonious political fools should be looking for the billions of dollars that's been stolen from the state of Minnesota. So yes, let ICE patriots do their job. 12,000 illegal alien criminals, many of them violent, have been arrested and taken out of Minnesota. If they were still there, you would be seeing something far worse than you are witnessing today. So understanding all of that, and understanding again, let's just remind everyone, he appears to have pulled out his gun on ICE agents. I want you to take a listen to the narrative, for instance, that was sold by Democrat politicians today, like Jacob Frey, because as you could imagine, there is virtually no mention of what actually happened, the details. No, it's just ICE killed an American citizen.
I just saw a video of more than 6 masked agents pummeling one of our constituents and shooting him to death. How many more residents, how many more Americans need to die or get badly hurt for this operation to end? How many more lives need to be lost before this administration realizes that a political and partisan narrative is not as important as American values? How many times must local and national leaders must plead with you, Donald Trump, to end this operation and recognize that this is not creating safety in our city?
Yeah, so here we go again. Quite conveniently, no mention of the circumstances that led up to the shooting. And you once again hear the argument of, well, you know, maybe left-wing terrorists would stop committing violence if you just stopped enforcing the law, right? That's how the chaos would end. That's how you would get our voters to, stop chasing you around in the streets, trying to hit you with cars, trying to shoot you. Yeah, just leave, right? Just surrender the city. Stop enforcing federal law in the United States of America. What an amazing argument. But that said, if you thought that part was deranged, or at the very least missing a lot of context, I now want you to listen to the words of knucklehead himself, Mr. Tim Walz, because it gets even worse.
Minnesota and our local law enforcement, as you have seen, have done everything possible to de-escalate.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you right there, Tim Walz. Done everything possible to de-escalate. They weren't even there. Actually, in all of these cases of the situations you're outraged about, do you know why ICE is handling it to begin with? Because MPD is not there. So if you're going to make the argument that, ICE is handling it wrong or they're using too much force, okay, again, I repeat, let the police do it then, right? ICE's job is not to deal with civilian U.S. citizen, criminal matters on a day-to-day basis in local areas. That's the job of police. So why don't the police step up then and do their job? And, they've been doing everything in their power. They're not even there. They're not even there. The gaslighting on this is actually ridiculous. I mean, we're used to politicians lying, Democrats lying, whatever. But the upside down, the disconnect here from reality, I don't know what to say. It's just astounding. Police are doing everything. They're not even on the streets.
Media has reported extensively on the cooperation to de-escalate this situation.
Cooperation. The local law enforcement is cooperating with ICE to de-escalate the situation. By definition, they're not. Okay.
Donald Trump, I call on you once again. Remove this force from Minnesota. They are sowing chaos and violence. We've seen deadly violence from federal agents again and again and again. But in contrast to that, on these frozen streets, what you witnessed yesterday was the best of Minnesotans, peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights. And I attended in the church basement hundreds of Minnesotans from all faith packing care packages for families that have been ripped apart. Despite the horrific acts by this federal government, Minnesotans are standing up for the rule of law. They're protesting loudly and urgently, but peacefully. It must stay that way, Minnesota.
So now they've been protesting peacefully. The gaslighting here continues, right? So not only does he say the federal government's engaged in deadly violence. Yeah, why? Why? What led up to the deadly violence? Is it because the left wingers in the streets were also trying to commit deadly violence? I guess not, but okay. All right, then secondly, right? He doesn't go on to actually call to, turn down the temperature or whatever. No, he endorses and tries to frame as peaceful the behavior we've seen out in the streets, right? When we've shown you time and time again, it's not peaceful. They're rioting, and he's actually encouraging them, calling them the good guys, right? Spinning this whole narrative. And again, I have to ask the question to Tim Walz, okay? Seriously. And Jacob Fry, by the way. If you're going to sit there and claim, on one hand, that these ICE agents are just randomly murdering U.S. citizens, why do you keep on encouraging your own voters to go out there and engage in that type of behavior, right? Because according to you, that's all they were doing. Oh, they're just peacefully protesting and ICE shot them. Oh, they were just trying to document what's happening and ICE shot them. And then you go say, respond to it by more peaceful protesting and more documentation of what's happening, right? So, in other words, what you're trying to argue here is that you want your own voters, apparently, to be sacrificed in order to make a point, to create a political narrative. It doesn't seem very safe to me, right? If you want people to stop getting killed in these situations, call off the dogs. Stop encouraging your voters to go in and get themselves and provoke deadly situations with ICE agents. But instead, it's the opposite, right? No, they're the heroes. He's going to keep on encouraging it, and then it's our fault for sowing chaos and division in Minnesota, while, of course, Mr. Tim Walz here, compares the whole situation to 1863. He says it's the Civil War all over again. He's, talking about deploying the National Guard against the federal government and all of this garbage. It goes on and on.
And I know people are discussing this a lot. I spent a lot of time with John Lewis on nonviolent resistance. The resistance matters. We're not telling people to be silent, but we're not telling people to go out and cause problems. We're going to cause good trouble.
We have to cause good trouble. Well, what does that actually mean? What kind of trouble are you speaking about, Tim Walz? Does it involve running over ICE agents with your vehicle, a behavior that your entire state party defended? Does it involve trying to pull out guns on ICE agents, throwing rocks, assaulting them, trying to take their lives? I have to say this seriously. Please explain that to me. Because in every single case where you people decided to get outraged, that's along the lines of what went down and how it's all happening, and you go out and defend. Is this on your screen, by the way? This right here, right? Just full First Amendment behavior going on as they created impromptu barricades to block the roads. Is that good trouble, right? Is handing over the streets of your entire city to the mob good trouble? Because, by the way, I just further like to point out, Tim Walz today has essentially admitted that this is exactly what he has done in Minnesota, while of course also claiming that, law enforcement is doing its full job, right? We did not have enough resources to be able to hold that ground safely. In other words, the conspiracy theory is true here, right? They've surrendered the streets of this city to the mob.
The public knows, and this needs to be the event that says enough. Go ahead. No, I'm up front.
We don't trust the federal government to handle this investigation. We know with the Renee Good shooting, BCA said that they were blocked from accessing evidence. Has there been any suggestion that BCA is not allowed to do this investigation? Do you have officers on the ground doing the investigation right now?
The question was related to whether or not the BCA is on the ground currently with the investigation, and a reference to previous investigations that the BCA have attempted to be a part of. What I'll tell you right now is that we no longer have BCA agents or public safety, state patrol, or Minneapolis on the ground at that crime scene.
Is that an instruction by the federal government, or did you pull your agents out?
What I will tell you, and not to get further into the investigation, but DHS pulled out of the scene, leaving that to Minnesota State Patrol, Minneapolis. We did not have enough resources to be able to hold that ground safely, and we had to leave that scene because of the number of people that were available and the safety of those in the public and the safety of our teams. We were able to get there but at that time, we were not able to hold that scene to do a crime scene investigation. I can't talk any more about those details.
Okay, so in the same exact press conference where Tim Walz is claiming that his law enforcement are doing everything they can and they've been trying to cooperate and de-escalate, there you got an open admission from his own state official that they lost control of the situation. Actually, the police were unable to even keep the scene of that very protest where it all went down safe, and so they had to get back and retreat. But I really do have a couple questions there. How could that be the case, number one? I thought, Tim Walz, as you just said, right, leftists are such wholesome and amazing individuals, and they were peaceful, right? Why would there be a safety risk? I thought you guys are all just a bunch of lovely hippies who, care about the flowers and the turtles and the environment, and you would never hurt a fly, and yet you apparently somehow, your people managed to scare off your own police from a crime scene, and they basically just surrendered the entire streets to the mob. And if that's the case, by the way, could you perhaps maybe consider, Tim Walz, that ICE has reasons to quote unquote act aggressively? I would argue more like act offensively when it comes to dealing with your mob of voters. I don't know, just some things to consider. But that said, amidst this admission that apparently control has been lost in Minneapolis, Tim Walz has indeed stated today, finally, he will be activating and deploying the National Guard in Minneapolis. Now, this is a little bit of a vague statement that I'm trying to figure out how to interpret, and so we'll kind of show you both sides of that, because I like to remind everyone, Tim Walz is the same exact politician who recently did compare the situation in Minneapolis to 1863 in the Civil War, and then he further went on to say he would consider deploying the state National Guard against ICE agents in the federal government, which sounds pretty openly like a call to insurrection. But amidst all the tough guy rhetoric, when his actual National Guard official comes up to speak, it sounds more like he's talking about maybe something that the right-wingers would like, which is, hey, we should deploy the National Guard to calm the situation, right? Stand between ICE and the protesters and crazy agitators and violent mobs, so that way civil order is restored in the streets. So, take a listen to this. It seems like even Tim Walz doesn't really understand what he's telling his own National Guard to do, but pretty interesting.
Ernesto with the New York Times. Have you activated the National Guard? I noted that Sheriff Witt has requested for additional assistance. Can you tell us whether they're going to be playing a role in keeping?
Yes, the answer is yes, we have, as we said last week, and we staged those troops. I'll have General Menke talk about where they're at, and again, use this as an opportunity to stress to Minnesotans the frustration you have, and as you saw this, they killed a man, created chaos, pushed down protesters, threw gas indiscriminately, and then left the scene, and then we're left to clean up. I understand the anger.
That's not what happened.
I understand trying to parse who were the law enforcement on the scene when you got there after a man was killed is difficult for the folks who are out there. But I can't stress enough, our goal, and I'll have General Menke talk about what the role of these Guard troops are in conjunction with incredible work from the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, from mutual aid across, and of course the State Patrol, of trying to get to the point where what we're saying is we can handle this and Minnesotans can express their First Amendment rights and have our folks on the streets and get these people out of here. And so, John, if you want to talk a little bit, but the answer is yes, there's activated. He can talk to you about numbers.
To be clear, that they're activated different than having them staged.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the National Guard doing right now? So we have, we have been on state active duty for over a week. So we've had soldiers prepared in the metro area to respond in a much rapid manner than if they were not mobilized. So we have a request from the Hennepin County Sheriff to support them, and that is to help them free up additional resources for other work that they need to do. And we have started coordinating with them this morning on that, and that first area of support will be assisting them with their requirement to provide security to the Whipple building. So we'll be helping them there, and then we are in parallel planning with other organizations within the state of Minnesota, to include the State Patrol, the Minnesota DNR, and other local agencies to render assistance if requested.
Right, so I don't know if you noticed that, but Tim Walz kind of frames it like he did before, as we're sending in the National Guard as an attempt to get the federal government out of there. Yet when you listen more to the details, look, we'll find out what actually happens, but it sounds a lot more like, especially when the National Guardsman himself is speaking about what they plan to do, They're actually, in one case, mentioning they're going to protect the federal building, which means, in other words, well, we're going to deploy the National Guard to separate the ICE agents from the left-wing protesters, and apparently that's supposed to be bad for the right-wingers, right? Tim Walz, he thinks he's owning the Trump administration by saying, oh, well, we're going to send in the National Guard so that way ICE doesn't have to, be shooting at any more left-wingers. Yeah, that's what we want, Tim Walz. Have you realized that's what we've been asking for the entire time, right? We don't want your crazy voters to be getting into these confrontations with ICE agents either. We would prefer they just not engage in those behaviors, but if they're going to choose to do so, yes, what have we been saying since the beginning, very publicly? We want the cooperation of local authorities so that way ICE can do its job, which is immigration enforcement, and not be stuck fighting with these agitators that, you admitted yourself you've surrendered the streets over to.
We will not allow violence against our law enforcement officers, and we need state and local help, state and local law enforcement, to help us coordinate to get violent criminals off the street.
So yeah, if I'm correct about this, it is fantastically hilarious how, in an attempt to apparently punch back at the Trump administration, he's giving us exactly what we've been asking for this entire time. And I'm sure left-wingers will see the National Guard on their streets and be like, what? They're militarizing the city. This is the Trump administration. No, actually, that was Tim Walz. That was Tim Walz who just did that. And we're not complaining about it, but, it is what it is. And no matter how much tough talk he wants to spread out there about pushing insurrection, I think he also has to understand at the end of the day, the Minnesota National Guard's a part of what? The U.S. military. Who's the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military? And secondly, as it pertains, let me just guess, to the personal loyalties of most of those soldiers, it's not with you, Tim Walz, right? So I think they'd be more than happy to go in and say, okay, we're going to protect the ICE agents. We're going to, maintain civil order on our streets. But, I'm going to take a wild guess that this standoff that Tim Walz is dreaming about just will not happen for practical reasons. And as a matter of fact, I think you're going to see the opposite. But anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts about all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.